Hey, what's up, guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. Just want to briefly talk about Christian persecution. Very briefly. I don't want to spend too much time on this today, but there's a lot of stuff in the news about Christian persecution. You just type it in on Google or Start Page or something like that, and it's going to pull up a bunch of articles. You have The Guardian talking about it. There's like 3 or 4 articles that the Christian Post published. Christianity Today, the Daily Caller, Vanguard, all these places talking about Christian persecution. Well, there's a couple thoughts on this. First off, for anyone who subscribes to the pre-tribulation rapture view, this is sort of a worldly blow to that concept that the church won't experience any kind of persecution before we are raptured. Okay, a lot of people that take on that view are probably Americans, mostly, I guess. I mean, it's kind of a generalization, but Christian persecution and tribulation has been happening for centuries. This is nothing new. So this idea that we won't experience tribulation before we are raptured is pretty absurd if you look around. Now, I know some people who subscribe to the pre-tribulation rapture will say, well, yeah, persecution has always been there, but we won't experience the wrath of God. And go check out my little study that I did on the pre-wrath rapture, because the way pre-trib people define the wrath of God, I think is wrong. But, that's just my opinion on that. I think the wrath of God begins at the opening of the 7th seal. And the wrath of God that's poured out is in the 7 trumpets and the 7 bowl judgments, not the 7 seals. But anyway, that's a whole different study. What I wanted to really mention is that we have to prepare our hearts. How are we living? What are we doing in the end times here? And I don't want to get into a long lecture type thing here today, but I do want to point out just a couple of scriptures. First off, Revelation 2, verses 8 through 11. This is the letter to the church of Smyrna. And here it says, "And to the angel of the church of Smyrna writes, the words of the first and the last who died and came to life. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich, and the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will not be hurt by the second death." Now, this is really interesting because, Jesus basically here says, hey, Church of Smyrna, you're doing a great job. I know your tribulation. I know your poverty, and I know your slander, those who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. And I know it's easy for people to say, see, the Jews, Israel, that's the synagogue of Satan. And I can meet you, 50, 60% of the way on that, in terms of Zionism and the political agenda behind the nation state of Israel. I don't subscribe to the hoopla of the modern popular prophecy culture of, we support Israel 100% militarily and politically. That's not to say I don't want to see Jews saved and come to Christ, but I don't think Bible prophecy was fulfilled with the nation state of Israel returning as most people touted. And I just don't see anywhere in the Bible that tells us to politically and militarily support the nation state of Israel. In fact, in my opinion, if God is in control of Israel, then it would be our lack of faith that makes us want to send them guns and money and all this stuff. If they're under God's protection, why do they need our protection, right? And I know you guys are going to point out Genesis 12 and all this stuff. And I've talked about some of those scriptures and those issues elsewhere. That's not what this video is about, but just in my personal opinion, I think that sentiment of supporting Israel 100%, blindly almost, is actually almost a setup of a huge deception for the church. And when Jesus says even the elect might be deceived, I'm starting to think that that could be part of this whole deception. But getting back to it, it says, "Do not fear for what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested." And this is really interesting because it's like Jesus is saying, hey, I know what you're going through. I understand it. Just be faithful. You're going to be thrown into jail. Some of you might die, but be faithful unto death. And, this is a tough message for probably the Church of Smyrna to swallow. It's like, hey, we're doing everything right, but we're going to be sent to prison. And it really gives us sort of a perspective of whoever is part of the Church of Smyrna. Of course, at the time it was written, but also I think in a far reach application to our time today. I think in the end times, the church itself is going to divide into these 7 churches, not specifically geographically or anything like that, but I think there's just going to be groups of believers that will fall under one of these categories of churches. And those who fall under the category of the Church of Smyrna, they have to be tremendously strong in their faith. If the story of the shooter in Oregon is true, and he did shoot people that claim to be Christians, that's sort of I think a shadow or sort of a precursor of the kind of persecution that can come to Christians based on their faith. And obviously not everybody hates Christians, and not everybody thinks that Christians should be shot or anything like that, but I think the growing darkness that we're seeing come over this world will eventually lead to a place where that sort of thing is common. The other passage I want to read to you is Revelation 3, verses 7 through 13. This is to the church of Philadelphia. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, the words of the Holy One, the true One, who has the key of David, who opens, and no one will shut, who shuts, and no one opens. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but a little power, and yet you have kept my word, and have not denied my name. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word about patient endurance, I will keep you from the hour of trial that is coming on the whole world, to try those who dwell on the earth. I am coming soon. Hold fast what you have, so that no one may seize your crown. The one who conquers, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. Never shall he go out of it. And I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes down from my God out of heaven, and my own new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So again, this one has been used for a pre-tribulation rapture view as well, in terms of being protected from the hour of trial. But I don't think this is talking about the rapture. Rather, I think the Church of Philadelphia will be people that will be protected in some way, supernaturally or otherwise, during the time of trial. I think Christians are going to go underground, so to speak. I think mega churches and stuff like that are going to be for the apostate church to continue to go down that road. But real church will be in smaller groups, in homes, and, just the way it was in the first century. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of that. And, I think it's important for us to protect ourselves, obviously. That's sort of a prerogative that Jesus gives as well. But at the same time, it's about never giving up our faith in Christ. It's about patient endurance. It's about not denying Christ's name. And that's the key here to all of this. So I'm going to keep this short here. What are you doing to prepare your hearts for this sort of temperament, especially in the United States? I know not everyone watching these videos are in the United States, but there's this attitude in America about, it's never going to happen to us, or, we're protected, or all this. And that sort of thing is slowly starting to break down as well, based on just some of the things happening. But what are you doing to prepare? Physically, obviously, is important, to have a little bit of food and water to sustain yourselves in case something happens, an EMP or something like that. But what are you doing with your hearts? Are you preparing? Because in the heat of the moment, if we're not prepared spiritually, then we will bow down to the system. We will bow down, and we might take the mark without even thinking about it. Now I believe that most of you guys watching this video who are Christians, you guys are awake, aware, you're on fire. Even if we don't agree on every detail, I know that you guys are very passionate about Christ and about the gospel. And, I'm not worried about you guys, but within your communities, within your families, are you going to be the pillar of light in those dark times, or is your light going to fizzle out in those times, and it's all about preparation, the 10 versions, the 5 that were prepared and 5 that weren't. Are you going to be the ones prepared? So I just want to give you guys some food for thought on this. And it's not like the most cheery video or the most, fringy topics or anything like that. But I think that there's stuff going down that's going to be more and more difficult for Christians to operate. And I think we're already seeing a lot of compromise within the church. And, I don't think certain people totally understand how to handle this sort of thing. At the same time, I'm seeing a lot of political maneuvering using this sort of verbiage of Christian persecution for people to put themselves in political advantages or, just popularity or whatever. I mean, I'm seeing some of that as well. I mean, obviously, the Christian Post is one of those websites that's been publishing several articles on this topic. And man, I have a tough time with Christian Post. First off, they have way too many script and ads and stuff that pop up. And, they're just, I don't know, they bother me. I don't like going to their website. But in any case, what do you guys think? You guys ready? Are you guys willing to walk away from things like the internet, maybe? I think a day is coming when we're really just going to have to unplug. Are you guys ready to be a beacon of light in your own communities? I know a lot of people talk about, I don't have a church to go to. I don't have, get plugged in somewhere. You don't have to agree with everything that's going on at your local churches to be in that church. You can go there, you can be a part of a community, because that's what's going to happen as, the church goes into the wilderness, so to speak. We're going to be separated from the internet, but locally we will need to be with people that are of like mind and of, who share our values and things like that. And that's going to become more and more important. So it's important to plug in locally somehow, as well as your families and friends and things like that. I don't know. It was in my spirit today to talk about this and to share this. Who knows if it will help? Who knows if you will unsubscribe? I wouldn't be surprised either way, but I just wanted to get it out there. And so let me know what you guys think. God bless.